Why have Universe 6 Saiyans only just discovered Super Saiyan? Well, surely they must have done it already. Maybe they had done, but it was just lost to time. For reasons. Hey guys, MasakoX here. Sometimes, out of the blue, the best discussion topics on this channel just come to us by a complete and total happenstance situation. Sometimes with our discussions they are created by merely having just a casual conversation, a catch-up, and it just opens your mind to the possibilities of a brand new perspective on something that we just thought was perplexing or just we never really had a good idea for. I was having one day a chat with Bardock about future discussion topics, totally different from what we're talking about today. In this chat, we were discussing the potential of Saiyans and where they could go in future installments of the show. Was what we saw though in the Broly movie the most they could ever achieve if given the chance? We did muse that for a bit. Most Saiyans could, if given the right training, go Super Saiyan, for example. It was something that we got off the back of Beats and Paragus' conversation about the Uzaru transformation. Most Saiyan traits are granted at birth, but need proper study in order to attain maximum efficacy. Might the same apply to Super Saiyan as well? Who knew that Beats could actually provide so much deep thought for such an insignificant character? I still feel bad for what happened to him though. That being said, Super Saiyan isn't exactly something that you could learn in a couple of days, especially in Universe 7. This is something that would require a very specific mindset to master, plenty of time to grasp and understand, as well as a training regime which would be far more excessive than what the average Saiyan could ever dare to imagine. And just before you mention Caulifla, I'm talking about Universe 7 here, because there is a difference, I'll talk about that later. But going back to what we were saying, it's probably the main reason why most of the pre-Dragon Ball Saiyans never lived up to their potential. In that time, before Frieza dominated them, the power of the Great Ape was enough. It was enough to do what they needed to do. With power levels in the thousands or even sometimes the tens of thousands in those giant monkey forms, they could devastate anything that got in their way, the Saiyan tribe's way. Does that mean Super Saiyan was just impossible? Well, no. Improbable, yes, but impossible? No. You can thank Bardock for that. Now, I know that the episode of Bardock episode isn't beloved by most of you out there, or indeed almost anyone, but it does provide some curious insight, and it's something that is worth noting in this topic. In that story, Bardock was plucked out of age 737, probably from Torah Mirror, but they don't talk about that here, and he was placed back in time to the days of Planet Plant, before the Saiyans that resembled himself ever existed. A very short time later, relatively speaking, and his powers were tested by Chilled. In that moment of fury and frustration of being stranded in the past and facing a being who looked eerily like Frieza, Super Saiyan was activated in a being with just a power level of around 10,000 base. That power level in Saiyans is relatively common, or it's possible. This opens the door to almost any mid-class Saiyan to gain the power, if exposed to the right conditions. Thanks to Bardock, you could indeed muse that nearly any Saiyan could get the golden hair power. This also gives Goku more reason to get it, just because of his protagonist past. He was destined for ultimate power, being the main character and all, but Bardock's situation gives his son even more reason to have the transformation. Even with all of this in the open and for us to discuss, we still sometimes cannot help but wonder what it would have been like if King Vegeta figured out how to turn himself and his other subjects into Super Saiyans. What would it have meant for Planet Vegeta? How would it have affected the class system of the Saiyans? Would it have made it even more apparent if they discovered that with a lot of push-ups, sit-ups and plenty of juice as well as hard work, they could, at least, have the potential to become Super Saiyans? If given time with someone who had mastered it, like Bardock, could this be something that almost any Saiyan could get regardless of their power level? Our belief is fueled even more by many non-canon sources, giving us things like Super Saiyan 3 Nappa and Raditz, or Super Saiyan Bardock, as well as Super Saiyan 3 Bardock. Yes, that is a thing. Yes, we know that these are means to sell merchandise, of course, first and foremost, but the very fact that time and effort was actually put into the creation of this concept gives the idea at least a little bit of legitimacy. If it was utterly preposterous for the average Saiyan to turn gold, then these ideas would never be uttered outside of the Dragon Room because it would just be not worth the hassle. As a result, the plot thickens. At the same time though, there is something quite ironic about this which we would like to share with you today. But why all of this mystery, Masako? Well, all of this has come about because, as far as we are concerned, the Saiyan Society of Universe 7 has held the whole legendary Super Saiyan thing in a pretty high regard. There is a reason why everyone from Vegeta downwards has looked to this past instance of this particular form with great respect and great fear. But the good kind of fear, like, ooh, it's a really powerful thing, ooh, spooky, but I still kind of admire it though. It was a power that rocked the universe, and something that ensured that the mighty Saiyan name was treated with the respect that the Saiyans felt that they deserved. How it came about exactly? Oh, that was just lost to time again. Or more probably because it was in that time period of Dragon Ball Z's manga run that Toriyama hadn't quite solidified the specifics of Super Saiyan yet, but thanks to this being a Saiyan folktale, the creator had a means to blindside us with awesome visuals and effective dialogue with something he hadn't really thought through yet. Smooth move, Toriyama. This sentiment is something that is still used to this day, most recently in the Broly movie. When Broly is brought to the attention of King Vegeta III, the Slavic-accented scientists, people of science, who would usually disregard legends actually, felt that this idea of this legend was actually important enough and legitimate enough to mention to the king as a possible explanation for Broly's extreme power, and something that the king actually took seriously. So seriously, in fact, that he felt it was worth time, effort, resources to be rid of it, exile it. He could have easily just brushed this off, or even rolled with it as a handy tool for his subjects, but no, he was really scared of this power because he thought it was a big deal. Which brings us to our next point that we would like to discuss. Thanks to the very same movie, we have a much better understanding of how Saiyan society worked as a whole. Before the latest film, as well as the side manga Dragon Ball Minus, to a lesser extent, we mostly assumed that the lifestyle of the Saiyans was pretty universal. They were all warriors, and in terms of a social structure, there wasn't really a social structure. All they did was live in mud huts as far as we were concerned. They ate, they trained, and then went off to battle. That was it. We didn't think that they could be Saiyans who didn't fight first and foremost, but instead learnt skills to make the people like any other world, with different disciplines and means to better themselves. All of this stuff was something that we could observe in the flashbacks from the Broly movie. They were capable of evolving, thanks to not only the Cold Force, but also the evil Saiyans who won against Yamoshi. Yamoshi, that guy from Battle of Gods who is believed to be another legendary Saiyan, seemingly opposing the evil Saiyans. But as we mentioned in our other videos talking about him, he ultimately failed in his mission to purify the Saiyans into something better, and we ended up with the Saiyans that we are most accustomed to. Now, they may not be as evil as those evil Saiyans were probably from the past, sort of like Kumba, but they aren't exactly a glowing example of goodness either, nor are they loved or treasured by other civilizations. We can only guess how close the more modern Saiyans resemble the evil Saiyans as a whole, but the term evil is something that can be sort of tagged with them, which is kind of funny when you think about it. Why is that? Well, it's because they had to be powerful enough to challenge Super Saiyan God, but now the typical Saiyan isn't even close. Some of them, like Gine, are very lucky to even be in the triple figures. They got comparatively soft in the eons since Yamoshi's day. Thanks to those pesky evil Saiyans winning the battle against the original Super Saiyan God, the way their descendants lived meant they weren't pure-hearted, nor did they possess anything that could resemble a gentle spirit, nor could you describe them of having actually any strong emotional responses. They kind of just exist as grunts with no real sense of self. They are all the same in a way and serve a singular purpose: to conquer. With the defeat of the Super Saiyan God, a malaise could have descended, and you could say that the Universe 7 Saiyans just stopped innovating, stopped having a real sense of self, and became a lot more generic, a sort of hive mind, They all like to battle, that's all they do. They not only lost their connections to the power that Yamoshi got, but also potentially the most basic Super Saiyan forms. There was a clear grouping of peoples: low class, mid class, and elites. The elites set the bar for progress, and nothing was going to get in the way of that. Thanks to what King Vegeta did, we can quite fairly assume that any Saiyans that would buck the trend too hard either way could either be exiled or gotten rid of another way. You can't disrupt things, or else the entire system would fall apart and King Vegeta's status would be compromised. Now, we can't be having any of that. That's why that in future tellings of Yamoshi, they don't consider him as a pure Saiyan, but as a Saiyan who was different, weird, a disruptor, thusly affirming what the king intended, keeping his subjects in line, or else the same fate that Yamoshi had would happen to them. Ooh. Isn't this an ironic twist of fate that the first one to achieve the form was actually Goku, who at this point was an outsider? Someone who actually did buck the trend? Someone who's subject to the castigation of the Saiyans? It's kind of curious in that way and somewhat poetic. What's even more ironic is the fact that we have seen the alternative scenario play out. One where Yamoshi, or Yamoshi's equivalent, did win out in Universe 6. You see, the Universe 6 Saiyans that reside on Sadala, the original homeworld for all Saiyans, might have had a similar legend to the one that our Saiyans had. It differs, of course, in some ways, one being that their legendary Super Saiyan appeared just a mere 18 years after Yamoshi did. It is also really interesting that in Universe 6, Kale's transformation wasn't embraced as the sign of the legendary Super Saiyan returning, like what we got with Goku, to lead their way to glory. Vegeta heralded the arrival of the legend, even if it was Goku who got it first, but Vegeta did eventually get it, and he called himself the legend as well, proud to be granted this power. But when Kale got it, we didn't see any of that. All we got was fear and foreboding and worry. As noted by Kaba and Caulifla, the form that we saw Kale transform into is seen as quite the opposite of what we're used to. In Universe 6, this legendary power, or what we tend to call Super Saiyan Berserker, has been labelled as a Demon Saiyan, a Saiyan which is far from the typical example, and whose sole existence is centered around going on rampages across the populace, regardless of friend or foe, and whose power grows constantly and without compromise, eventually to the point that it totally consumes its host's mind and soul. That Saiyan is lost to the power, and if left unchecked, it would spell the utter destruction of lives of the Saiyans that they knew. It would ultimately also end the life of its host in a blaze of energy. Now, we all knew from the start that the gimmick between Universe 6 and 7 is that they're opposites. What exists in Universe 7 probably does as well in Universe 6, but slightly differently. Unless you end up scorching your own planet, which is what happened to Universe 6's Earth. Nice going, guys. That being said, not everything is different. A lot of things are very similar, surprisingly so. Which just shows that around 238 to 220 years before age, the two Saiyan cultures might not have been all that different from one another. At some point, these two entities might have been totally identical. The twisted cult of Yamoshi's power as Super Saiyan God and the victory of the evil Saiyans could have been the point of divergence between them. One universe went one way and one went the other. The thing that ruined the planet Sadala of Universe 7 didn't happen in Universe 6's Sadala, and thusly, those Saiyans remained on that planet. The fear of the legendary Super Saiyan, who as we know it might have just been a victim of this power, just like Broly, caused the Universe 6 Saiyans to not scorch their world and instead contain themselves. The original Saiyans, which sort of resemble Shallot, went on to evolve in a manner which was less animalistic than the Universe 7 Saiyans. What's really interesting to us is that both groups still lost their ability to transform into Super Saiyans. We're not counting the Uzaru power here, but seeing how weak and insignificant it sadly is in the grander scheme of things, yeah, we consider it just a minor pass. And how it were the Universe 7 Saiyans who taught their opposite beings how to transform again. The power was there the whole time, but it had been forgotten deliberately. If this legend is still floating around, the older Universe 6 Saiyans might not be all that keen to hear that the youth has started to transform again. It might be a bad omen, and is a worry that was valid thanks to Kale. Thankfully though, that power when given the chance to be resisted, thanks Jiren, and then controlled has now been quelled and contained. Still, when all is said and done, with how Goku resembles Universe 6 Saiyans in some regards, it is very clear that both cultures are kept in their place by their lack of balance, as clearly the Super Saiyan power and transformations are just a thing which heavily relies on inner balance and coordination. It is the embodiment of fury, but a cold one, as we saw in Goku's fight against Frieza. It's almost like the two groups of Saiyans shared two pieces of the same puzzle, but for centuries, they were unable to communicate it or to realize it. One that twisted a hero into a monster that was feared but respected, and the other that probably twisted a victim into a monster that was mostly feared and became a boogeyman of sorts. So, all things considered, we're pretty glad that Universe 6 Saiyans are a thing, because it allowed us to have that what-if look on the race, and reminded us that a little detail or perception change can mean a lot, and has a big ramification on a culture as a whole, not only a fictional one. Think about how many things that we have today that are leftovers from ancient times, for reasons that are almost entirely forgotten. Dragon Ball isn't really a deep series, but it's always fun when it gives you some opportunity to think differently. And with its world being established a bit more confidently in recent years, we can really analyse it better, even if that means that we somehow have to cope with tingly backs and diet supplements that turn you into an animal. So what do you guys think? Are you glad that Universe 6 is around? What might this mean for the future of Sadala now that Kale's power has brought back old memories to the fore? Leave a comment below and let's get this discussion going, and I shall see you in the next video. Catch you later!